And the next thing that happens for several chapters is actually the sacrifices. And I'm going to just show you what's there, and then we'll stop there. So in chapter 28, you stay there in case I have something to read. Let's see what we find. So in chapter 28, just to give you an idea, it starts out with the daily offerings, and basically, and we go into details at other times with these, but the daily offerings, every day, there's no sacrifice without that morning and evening sacrifice. Nothing else happens. There's a morning sacrifice, and then all the daily sacrifices, and it closes with the evening sacrifice. Okay? They all have to be inside of that. That goes down to, that's verse 1 through 9. On the Sabbath day, there are special sacrifices on the seventh-day Sabbath. You add 2 lambs and burnt offering. And then in verse 11 through the end of 15 there's monthly sacrifices, okay, that have to do with the new month, okay. And then in chapter 16, verse 16, 17 talks about the Passover. Special offerings there. And then 18 through the end of 25, that's more Passover. Passover goes from 16 through 25. I read that wrong. I don't know what this little glitch thing I've got written here is. I know what it is. Okay, it didn't have it. It looked like a stopping point, but it wasn't. What you got a question? Yeah. Okay, just say it and I'll repeat it. Who had the question? Go ahead, Joe. Great question. You know which one he fulfilled? Okay. Okay. Yeah. 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 Okay, so the online audience can hear. He basically said when then there will be a temple. Bible says there will. When they build a temple in Jerusalem, and Yeshua was all the sacrifices, fulfilled all the sacrifices, will there be sacrifices? Absolutely. Every single one of these sacrifices will take place in the temple. We see that in the millennial. What's very interesting is, I was going to go there. In the millennial reign with Yeshua there, we see the sacrifices going on. And that kind of freaks people out. So it's a great place to stop. I'm going to just leave y'all freaked out. No, I'm going to actually, let me explain. Did these sacrifices actually forgive sin? They actually didn't. They never did. They pointed to the one who would. These are all types and shadows. Okay? All of them are. Okay? And they all pointed to Messiah. So when they're doing them in the future, guess what? They still point to Messiah. Because they never really done away with it. And the book of Hebrews goes into great detail about that. When you understand that the book of Hebrews is about the priesthood, not the covenant. And just ignore the italicized letters or mark them out and then words and then reread Hebrews, and it changes the picture of what it's actually talking about. Go ahead, Christy.
And this is very apropos because this actually came from Brad's side. You had a picture.
I tell you what, can you come, hold on and come up here and take the mic, because, well, or you can sit down or you can take the mic, either one. All right.
I'm gonna repeat what Brad Scott kind of painted a picture for me, okay? And the picture is when, yeah, very good. When somebody is walking down the street and there's a building there, okay, and you're like on one side walking towards them and they're coming this way, you know, and you're about to meet, but you see a shadow. You see their shadow, okay? Mm-hmm. You see their shadow there, okay? And you're, so you know, and you're anticipating because you see the shadow. You know somebody's coming, right? You see the shadow. Once they're there, okay, the shadow doesn't cease to exist.
You
Okay?
just know what it
But it's like really not necessary at that point because you got the real thing.
but it's still there.
And I thought that was an awesome picture of exactly what God did. And there are going to be people that aren't quite there yet, and so the shadow will be necessary
I think
to bring them there.
I think the first one.
Does that make sense?
For sure. And if the first one, let's just assume the temple gets built and becomes functional, which prophecy describes that it does become functional before the second coming, okay? Because there's a temple when it gets here. It's still going to serve, people, the Western world, the Christian world kind of flips out about this idea that most of them are going to be running and crying, blasphemy and all this. No, it's going to be one of the most incredible witnessing opportunities we ever have to Judah.
Okay.
Is to show them
We do have to say to the people that are online and everything, Yeshua is the ultimate
He fulfilled all the
of
sacrifices.
that. Okay, of that shadow. He is the one we've all been looking for. So to us who are believers and know him, the shadow is not necessary anymore.
But think about
But
when
it's
it's
always
there.
pointing to him.
Think about when it's there. You can say, well, look at what that's doing, and look what Yeshua did here, and look what he says. And I don't know that it's going to be us doing that so much as I think it's this incredible awakening that's in Israel already. They're going to be doing it.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be us, but I don't think it. Thank you, Chrissy, for that. Another interesting verse I'll just close with. How many times have I closed so far? And I got to find it. Chapter 8 of Book of Hebrews. I'll read it for you. And he gets to we've gone through 8 chapters. Okay, and again, because of the worldview of the translators, they unintentionally forced the book of Hebrews to be reading mostly about a covenant, and a covenant is mentioned a couple of times, but what it's really talking about is the priesthood. And I've done this teaching before. I'm going to do it again. We'll get a recording of it one day. And so he does 8 chapters, and here's what he says. Now the main point is this. So he's fixing to tell us what the main point of the previous 8 chapters is about. We have such a high priest. Now just stop right there. I mean, if that was the only verse you had out of this whole book, you're going to go, is this about a covenant or about a priesthood? It's clearly about a priesthood. And so he's just spent 8 chapters describing this priesthood, and he says, we have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of majesty in heaven. Of course, he's talking about Yeshua, the minister of the sanctuary, the true tabernacle, not the one made by hand. Every high priest is appointed to make offerings and gifts and sacrifices. Therefore, it's necessary for him to have one to offer. And of course, he's talking about his own blood. Now, watch verse 4. For if he, Yeshua, were on earth, he would not be a priest, since there are priests who offer gifts according to the Torah. So here we have, Joel, it's a great question. Here we have a temple operating, fully functional with a Levitical priesthood and an Aaronic priesthood in the presence of believers, in the presence of Paul or one of his followers, very possibly. Sounds a lot like Paul, so it's either him or probably one of his followers. Doesn't matter. It's a follower of Messiah who clearly understands the priesthood. And he's basically telling us right here in the New Testament, this is a non-issue. I mean, otherwise he would be saying, and of course you as believers don't pay any attention to all that because it's like, no, it's a different Levitical priesthood. Let me back up. It talks a lot about the Melchizedek priesthood here. Okay, the Melchizedek priesthood is the original oldest order of priesthood. That's who Abraham gave a sacrifice to. Okay, Melchizedek, king priest, who's actually a picture of Messiah too, but that's another story. And then he describes in here that actually Levi, since Levi's seed was in Abraham, Levi actually paid tithes to Melchizedek, and he's making the point that Melchizedek priesthood, which is what Yeshua is an older and higher order. Levitical Aaronic priesthood, which is the temple operating, is a picture of the sacrifices of the true one, which is a higher order in heaven, which only can be fulfilled by Messiah. And that's what he just summed up here. He said, we have a priest like that, in order of Melchizedek. He said that multiple times. Ministered in a real sanctuary, the one in heaven. And because they have to have gifts, he had one, and he had himself. He had his own blood. And if he was here on the earth, he wouldn't even be a priest, because he's not a Levitical priest. He's not a Aaronic priest. He's a Melchizedek priest. That's the higher order. Okay, there are. So I think this is real cool, and he says the ones here are just, verse 5, he said, this is just a copy. It's just a copy, just a picture. So we understand. This is a shadow of the heavenly things. So it says, I'm going to stop right there. So basically, the one here, when it's operating, is an opportunity for us to talk about the heavenly priesthood, the Melchizedek priesthood. The one that it pointed to. It pointed to Messiah. It always did. It did in the New Testament here when it was still functioning until 70 AD. I mean, there's for 40 years it functioned after Yeshua died. And you never see a single word spoken against it because God said do it. Okay? So that's more evidence that the Torah is not done away with. Even when Messiah, his followers still, no, that's not an issue. Why would you stop doing that? It points to Messiah. So I think that's the way we have to approach it in the future. It points to Messiah. Yes? Okay. Right. Right. And a couple others. Yeah. I think he's trying to show him. And so what she mentioned was that there were some miracles that we know took place in the temple on the Day of Atonement, that it's recorded in Talmudic rabbinic literature about a scarlet thread cord that they would tie one to the scapegoat, the Azazel goat, and it's like hitting me so hard I got to say it. If you have an Adventist background and you were taught that goat, I can't go there? Okay. Look at that carefully before you take the traditional meaning of what that goat is. And ask yourself, can Satan pay for anybody's sin? And we'll just leave it right there. So it can't possibly have represented Satan. Okay. Worldwide taught it. It's out there. So I'm not picking on anybody. Just be aware that it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So the whole Torah is about the Messiah, not about Satan. Yeah, in the story. So the miracles ceased. Those miracles, there are multiple miracles about the thread turning white and all this, as a picture. And of course, the veil tore from top to bottom. Yeah. And so all these miracles that were centered around the Day of Atonement ceased as a picture that wasn't real, this is the real one. This was the type and shadow. This is the real one. And when they do it again, it's not going to start back up. And by the way, it's kind of fascinating too that in the second temple, the Shekinah glory of God never appeared there, because that would have taken away from the glory of Yeshua, who is God in the flesh, and being present. So they knew that it was inferior. They knew it, and it was all through prophecy anyway. I don't desire, bulls and goats and all, So it's very clear. But great question. How do we approach the sacrifices? I think exactly the way they did in the book of Hebrews. Oh, we got people to do that, but the real one, let me tell you about him. It's almost like Paul going into Ephesus and like, I see you people are really religious. We walk up, you guys are really religious, all your sacrifices stuff. Let me tell you about the higher order. Let's go back to Abraham. You do honor Abraham, right? Let's look at who he paid tithes to. Did it Levi and Aaron? Who's he paid tithes to? Melchizedek priesthood. Where's that? Let's talk about that. So it gives us a place to go. It has to be a witnessing opportunity. That's how we have to approach it. And think about that. People are going to be flipping out, trust me. But anyway, it's good stuff. Thank you guys.